Hello and welcome to the Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project virtual public meeting and open house. The intent of this presentation is to give a broad perspective on the Rawhide Wash Project. We have an agenda that's listed here down the side of the elements we'll be covering in this presentation. We'll start with an overview of the actual virtual public meeting and some details that you'll want to know about with regard to that. We'll introduce our team. We'll give a bit of a background on the project. We'll talk about the goals and benefits, introduce some of the key design elements, the landscape aesthetics, the construction elements. We'll talk through the schedule moving from this point forward, and then finally we'll wrap up with closing remarks. Although it would certainly have been our preference to be able to conduct this meeting personally, when been able to see each of you, we, given the COVID conditions and the current social distancing requirements, we opted to go with this virtual public meeting format. With regard to the schedule of this format and the meeting itself, we would like to set an official comment period that will begin January 18th and then extend for 2 weeks ending the close of business January 29th. With regard to the media links and everything that's up on the site where you started this presentation, we will definitely keep those up, and they will remain active and available during the course of the entire project. You can access those information via the same web address that you started this presentation from, which is shown here on the slide. If you may have noted when you started this presentation, there were other presentations up in the form of video formats, that star.mp4. There's this main presentation. We also have a presentation that goes into deeper details with regard to the project design elements. The same with landscape and aesthetics. And then finally, there's another video that is an introductory video to our construction manager at risk contractor, which is Rummel Construction. Finally, there are downloadable materials in the form of Adobe Acrobat PDF kind of files. So feel free to listen to all of those or download the materials and view them at your leisure. I wanted to take a moment to introduce the project team. Leading the project and the lead project manager for the Flood Control District of Maricopa County is Nizar Nabati. For the City of Phoenix, we have Ray Dovalina, who is the Assistant Public Works Director and Floodplain Administrator. For the City of Scottsdale, we have Ashley Couch, who is the Drainage and Flood Control Program Manager and Floodplain Administrator. Myself, Scott Ogden, I serve as Project Manager for the Prime Consultant team. And then finally, we have Jeremiah Hancock, who is the Construction Manager for the CMAR, the Construction Manager at Risk Company, Rummel Construction. With regard to comments and or any responses that you all might have as you're viewing this, or questions that might arise, we request that all of those correspondence be directed to our primary point of contact for this presentation, and that is Jesus Murillo. He is a senior planner with the City of Scottsdale Planning and Development Services. You can see his phone and email contacts. Jesus's role, again, is he serves as our primary point of contact, and his job will be to respond to questions that he can respond to, or ensure that all questions and comments are conveyed to the project team as needed so that we can properly respond to each of your thoughts and questions. I wanted to go over a little bit of the background of the project as we start this presentation off. This project, the Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project was originally conceived with the Pinnacle Peak West Area Drainage Master Study. That project was completed in June 2016. You can see this black outline is the total watershed limits that were studied during the PPW work. It includes a split among 3 jurisdictions: the City of Scottsdale, City of Phoenix, and then unincorporated Maricopa County. It originates in the upper reach of what is the Carefree area, or north of Carefree area, up in the Desert Mountain area, and you can see that this red line right here defines the actual Rawhide Wash total watershed. The PPW focus of the study was to identify flood hazards and flood risks, to identify possible mitigation opportunities or actions that could be taken, and also to do a revision of flood zones in this particular area over here from an alluvial fan flood zone, active alluvial fan flood zones, to a riverine flood zone. In the PPW study, the Rawhide Wash Project was originally titled the Rawhide Wash Conveyance, and it was the preferred alternative of many that were looked at the time. The primary goal of this project, of the conveyance project, and this project moving forward, was to control the flows of the apex and remove the flow path uncertainty, and then convey the full flow in a natural corridor and bracket that corridor with levees for containment from essentially about a half-mile north of Happy Valley Road down to the bridge at the Pinnacle Peak, and we'll talk more about that in coming slides. The construction portion of the project is primarily located within the City of Scottsdale. All of the construction that we are designing and doing is all occurring within the City of Scottsdale, within this reach I'm showing here. Part of the project's deliverables and or goals will be to do some redelineation of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, acronym FEMA, floodplain within the City of Scottsdale and the City of Phoenix, all the way from the fan apex, which is indicated by the star north of Happy Valley Road, all the way down to the confluence of Rawhide Wash with the Central Arizona Project dikes, in particular dike number 2, that it extends along the north side of the CAP Canal and contains pretty much all the flow. It's a very large dam, and if you're familiar or ever driven past that, you can see that it's a very large dam-looking structure. Overall, with this project and the construction of this project, there is going to be a removal of about just a little over just under 1,900 acres of land from the floodplain. That's going to be converted from this current alluvial fan floodplain that is generally outlined by this limit here, and the red area is going to be removed from the special flood hazard area, and the blue will remain in a special flood hazard area. You can see the split between the City of Phoenix and City of Scottsdale acreages, and this project design will be such that it will mitigate the 1% annual chance exceedance event, or basically in layman's terms of what is commonly known as the 100-year event. At this point in time, we have an estimated cost for the design, the utility relocations, the right-of-way acquisitions, construction, and construction management of around $16.5 million. That cost will be shared between the flood control district at 50%. The City of Phoenix shares in that cost at amount of 40%, and the City of Scottsdale's share in that cost is 10%. The district will be the lead agency for the design and construction of the project, but there is lots of input from the project partners, Scottsdale and Phoenix, and in particular Scottsdale, since most of the construction is within the City of Scottsdale. Regarding the authorization, the official authorizations for the project, there have been several IGAs and resolutions adopted by both cities and the county, Maricopa County, through the Flood Control District, beginning with a resolution in April 2018 that basically authorized the Flood Control District to develop the IGAs with the cities. Those IGAs were originally formulated and approved in January of 2019, and it basically authorized the design, rights-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation. So it got the ball started on the design process. In March 2020, another IGA was created that basically authorized the construction management and operation and maintenance of the project. Within that IGA was a provision to move towards a construction project deliverable process called a construction manager at risk. And basically what that means is that the contractor in this case Rummel Construction, will basically participate in the design process and then provide a bid estimate that will be basically locked in once it's finally approved, and there will be no room for change orders or anything along those lines. So it's a way to get a project delivered, and there's more conversation about this process and the benefits of this in the detailed presentation that is also on the website that you can download and listen to at your leisure. This project has many goals and benefits that I wanted to briefly touch on. First of all, with this project and the construction of this project, we're providing 100-year flood protection for more than 850 homes and buildings that are currently at risk. That's across both cities and the unincorporated county areas even. But the lion's share of those 850 structures lie within the City of Scottsdale. There's going to be a reduction in the actual floodplain, which will basically lead to the not having to have mandatory flood insurance for mortgage holders on properties that are currently located in the special flood hazard areas that will not be after the FEMA process is completed. There's also a reduction in cost for downstream drainage infrastructure because of the nature of an alluvial fan. There's a lot of potential redundancy in drainage infrastructure costs in the downstream area that will be removed by the building of this project. The flows will be captured and conveyed to one point that will then be available for the next project downstream to pick up and continue on downstream towards the final destination at the CAP Bureau dikes. Some of the key design elements for this project are illustrated and discussed here in this slide. If you look at this graphic on the right, it gives a clear picture of the limits of the area that we are looking at for the design project and the construction. It's outlined in this blue dashed area. Within this exhibit, you'll note that there are There are existing walls that are in this orange color that have been constructed with the developments adjacent to Rawhide Wash over the last almost 25 years, at various times as these projects have developed. This project, the Rawhide Wash Project, will also include the construction of new walls that will essentially connect up and close up the gaps in these existing walls. And then there's also, we'll be addressing some roadway crossings at Los Bertones Drive, a new future Miller Road crossing, which we'll discuss both of those at a point later, and etc. But the intent is to capture this. This is the fan apex up here, and you can imagine, you can almost see these threads where the wash is coming down, and it's fairly well contained in one spot, and then it starts to kind of spread. And what happens is, in a big flow event, with a lot of flow, the flows start breaking out and go in this direction. And they break out and they run down through here, and you can kind of see this corridor that has been preserved at some point for the ability to have some place for those flows to go when these areas were developed. The intent is to build new flood walls up to and past this apex that will basically provide containment of those flows and not allow them to break out any longer in this direction, and keep them within this primary Rawhide Wash corridor. Another aspect of this map is, you can see these lime green colored areas are the areas where the project anticipates having disturbed ground, where we know we're going to have to get in and move some dirt and remove some vegetation and replant and re-veg. So there will be some disturbances, but the goal is primarily to let the wash function in its natural capacity as much as possible, and then for the big larger events that cause the flooding outside of that general corridor, we'll use these flood wall system to provide the containment and keep those flood flows moving through and not running out here through the neighborhoods and through your houses and etc. The entire system is going to be considered or designed in a manner that we can certify it as a levee system, a complete levee system, because you can imagine that the flood walls, in the large storms, these flood walls are going to provide some level of containment of flood flows, and in the world of floodplain management, those become levees. And in order to be able to certify this project and gain the FEMA goals that we have FEMA standards that we have to meet. And that means that not only do we have to build the new walls to those levee standards, but we've also got to check these existing walls that are designed as flood walls, check these existing walls and make sure that they also meet those FEMA levee standards. Another one of the primary project goals is to make sure that we have access in and out of this wash corridor for both people and wildlife, and we're accomplishing that through leaving some openings, like in the Miller Road corridor here, and then we also have these little wall offsets where we bring one wall up and go up one way, the other wall comes down, and there's a path to go between them to get access from the dry side, if you will, of the wash to the wet side. That will help with the connectivity for the path and trail system that is designated for this area as well. There will be aesthetics that we'll be paying attention to for all of both the existing flood walls and the new flood walls. We want to make sure that those walls fit contextually in with the walls that are either existing out there or that fit the natural desert environment and meet the meet the overall goals of this area. There will also be, in the areas that we know we have to disturb, we'll be doing plant salvage per the City of Scottsdale ordinance to make sure that we have, we're capturing those plants. They'll be nurseried somewhere either up here or here, and then will be replanted back into the wash at the locations that were disturbed, hopefully back as much as possible back into the same locations they were taken from, and then reestablished that way. There will also be additional vegetation planted as appropriate to aid in restoring the disturbed areas back to their natural function. One of the other elements that is a part of this design is what we call interior drainage. And when we speak to interior drainage, we're talking about areas that are outside, on the dry side, if you will, on these levee system, that need to drain back into the wash. They don't have any place else to go but back into this wash corridor. And because of the kind of construction we're doing with these flood walls, we don't want to just cut those off. We want to make sure that there's provisions for those flows to get back into the wash. And so, for many of you in this area, if you're watching this presentation, you know that there are several threads of flow that come down through the subdivision, and those threads get collected right along this location here, and then are redirected back into the wash at this location around the Miller Road alignment. So that's one of the interior drainage areas that we're going to be paying attention to and providing designs for. We will accomplish that with the use of storm drains. In some places where we have these wall offsets, we can direct the drainage through the wall offset and bring it back in. And then whatever connections we make, we have to ensure that the flow can only go one way. So we want the flows to go from the dry to the wet side, and when the rawhide wash is flowing and flowing full, then those flows are not allowed, the rawhide wash flows are not allowed to go back through this direction and back up and flood the adjacent homes. So that all those interior drainage elements will be handled on a detailed basis. We'll be doing improvements down here at Los Bertones Drive. The road as it exists today is an at-grade crossing. It's also a private road that will remain private. The intent is to keep the road in the at-grade condition, and then we're going to use automated floodgates to seal off or keep the flow conveyance moving south within the corridor in the big flow events. And then finally, the entire system has to be designed to meet the FEMA standards. And FEMA standards include things, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but they basically include things like freeboard, structural integrity, foundation stability for the flood walls, the seepage requirements. There's all kinds of things that we have to make sure that we're paying attention to with this design to meet those FEMA requirements. Now, many of these things that are in these key design elements are addressed in another video that is posted to the website. That is the project design details video. And please, if you want to get further into understanding of what those are and get more expansion on the discussion of those, please view that video for those details. As previously mentioned, the aesthetics of the project are an important part of the design process. And to date, we have had several meetings with local teams, what we call our Project Aesthetics Advisory Committee. We have had one meeting with that group that's comprised of local homeowners and or people that are part of the homeowners association, the associations that are located along this wash, to give input to those design metrics and things that we might be considering. We have areas where we're going to be mitigating the existing flood walls through the need for raising the walls to meet the FEMA requirements. We're going to be looking at doing what we'll be looking to match basically what is there. So for instance, there's a couple of illustrations here. Wall A is this wall that's along the commercial corridor, these commercial buildings down here. You can see in the illustration, this is wall A. It's one wall that we know we're going to have to raise in several locations, and this illustration is meant to give you an idea that, you know, as we add courses to these masonry walls, they'll be designed to not only add the courses but then match the current stucco, likely be repainted the entire thing, and take care of that such that when the resultant wall is finished, it will look substantially like what is there now. Similarly, we have what we have named walls B and F. Wall B is down here, and then wall F is up here, and those two walls are similar in their makeup and their design. Again, they will require at certain locations elevation raises to account or accommodate for the FEMA freeboard requirements. They may not necessarily have water against them during the design, but those FEMA freeboard requirements are anywhere from 3 to 4 feet, depending on where you're at in the system. So they're not insignificant. And the intent with those areas where we have walls where we've got a view fence, we've got, you know, the lower wall masonry and then the wrought iron view fence up above, the intent will be to match the top profile of that view fence, add the courses of masonry that we need to get to the height that we need to meet the FEMA requirements, and then remove and replace the view fencing back to the same general profile so that it matches what's there now. Everything will be put in place, repainted as necessary to ensure that it's a continuous and solid look all the way up through there and matches what's out there now, with the exception of the raises and improvements. New wall options will likely be either they'll all be masonry walls. Right now the current thinking is all will be masonry walls, and they'll either be some form of painted stucco to match, you know, something along this lines here to match what's already out there if it's in the vicinity of another wall like that. Or there's an alternative to do what we call a mortar wash slump block, which is a block that has integrated colors within it and is very low maintenance, long term, doesn't require painting. All of the colorations are integrated within the block themselves. In the areas that we have identified disturbances for, we know that we will be doing plant inventory and native plant salvage per the City of Scottsdale ordinances. In general, for the most part, the width of the disturbance area adjacent to the existing walls, the corridor walls along the Rawhide Wash in the developed areas, is somewhere between 30 and 40 feet. It may extend out even further than that by 10 or 15 feet in some areas where we have some exceptionally deep need for erosion protection and whatnot. But the reality is most of it's in that 30 to 40 foot width, and even some are much less than that. The native plants will all be salvaged as required and nurseryed, and then the intent is to put them back into the wash at locations where they make the most sense. In the disturbed areas, the restoration of the landscape is an important element of this project as well. There's going to be, as we discussed before, there is going to be a limit of disturbance, and that disturbance, once the elements are completed, the walls are constructed, the erosion protection's in place, then the grade will be restored mostly back to the original grade that's out there now, and then the revegetation will be completed. three components. The salvaged material will be revegetated back, hopefully in the same or near the same areas where it came out. There will also be the use of the flood control district's tall pot trees, which are pictured here. Pictured in this area right here. That photo indicates, that they grow these in a PVC tube. Get them established, they get planted, remove the PVC tube with the moisture, and they have a really high success rate with these taking root, and they don't require irrigation. So that's something that will be used extensively in the project as well. And then finally, hydroseed. And the hydroseed will bring in, a native desert plant mix of materials and seeds that are already out there, and will be used to kind of bring in for the ground cover areas. A mix of what that might look like after a few years of growth looks like, is up in here in this photo. So the restoration will be completed at the end of the project. There will be a 10-foot clear zone maintained adjacent to the walls for maintenance and or inspections of the walls. But for the most part, the intent is to restore the vegetation back to, or at least with the potential of within several years coming back into what is out there now. Also, for further details of the landscape aesthetics and aesthetics of the walls, please see the recorded version of the landscape and aesthetics details presentation that's on the website. You can find that at the same place where you're viewing this from, and it will go into much greater detail on some of these elements. So one of the recent changes to the project was the initiation of the Miller Road improvement project that just recently occurred in the last several months. So that project will wind up basically filling a gap in Miller Road that exists between, essentially Pinnacle Peak and the improvements down here in this area. This exhibit is actually looking southerly towards Pinnacle Peak, and you can generally see the outline of the Miller Road alignment. Our Rawhide Wash is, alignment is through here. And that project again will complete the connection of Miller Road from Pinnacle Peak up to this point near East Parkview Lane. That design began in October 2020. However, the improvements for the area have been planned since the mid-90s. So, there's, as a matter of fact, if you go down here, you'll see a sign somewhere down here that basically lines out that this is a future Miller Road alignment. And so, again, it's been in the works for a very long time. It's just had recent funding come available to do the construction. The road's going to be 4 lanes with a bicycle, basically 4-lane roadway, so two travel lanes in each direction with bicycle lanes and sidewalks. The construction or the public outreach for the project is anticipated to begin sometime around March 2021, with the design expected to be completed somewhere about a year later, around March 2022. The construction of the project is estimated to be somewhere around the summer of 2022. This project is a City of Scottsdale project. It is a separate project from the Rawhide project, but we have a nexus, and that is where the road crosses the wash, and that crossing will be accomplished using a new bridge. So that bridge structure and the approach ramps up and to and away from the bridge are all part of the process. So that information, the details of that information and that design will be more forthcoming as that project continues with the City of Scottsdale. If there are questions or need for further information on that project, please contact the City of Scottsdale project manager, who is Jeremy Richter. His phone number and email address are indicated on this slide. Once the design is completed, the next obvious step is we move into the construction phase. As I noted earlier, the project partners in the flood control district chose to use the construction delivery in the way of a construction manager at risk. And that contractor was selected based on a qualifications-based selection and interview, and Rummel Construction was the successful application. Rummel will be participating, has been participating in our design process for the better part of 3 or 4 months now. They will have input into the design. They will have input into the elements with regard to their constructability, possible alternative materials, maybe better ways to implement the design, all elements that will ultimately result in a better project. And the partnering with the contractor in this method, using this CMAR delivery method, is generally going to improve the project delivery. It'll help the contractor with performing their public involvement when the contract starts, because they'll have a better understanding of what's already been done, who the people are, and it won't be quite the learning curve. And then also, by having Rummel a part of this contract and the design work at this point, Rummel will have a much more solid understanding of what the nuances of the project are and some of the desired design goals, in particular the protection of the natural assets and the minimizing the footprint and conceiving ways to do the construction in a manner that really minimizes the impacts to the wash and things like that. So having them aboard at this point has been really good, and we continue to look forward to having more input from them. The way of a project timeline, we'll start with where our 60% design submittal was made in March 2020. During the review that time and looking through those 60% designs, the discussions began with the Miller Road project, and officially as of October 2020, the Miller Road project started and was underway. And that project and the beginning of that project definitely shifted the overall Rawhide Wash project design schedule out to accommodate what would eventually be a portion of that Miller Road project, which is the bridge and abutments in the approaches at the crossing of Rawhide Wash. Those elements now have to be incorporated into the Rawhide project. So we had to kind of put the Rawhide on hold for a bit while we waited for Miller Road to get caught up. We're here at our virtual public meeting and doing that at this point. The intent is to, once we get through with the meeting and have received public comments or otherwise, and some additional information out of the Miller Road project, we'll wrap up and finish up our 90% design package and make a submittal to the reviewing agencies by the end of February 2021. Coincident with that 90% submittal, there will also be our conditional letter of map revision, CLOMAR, submittal to FEMA that will also be in that end of February timeframe. Our final construction package should be available sometime around May 2021, and the anticipation of the utility relocations beginning sometime in June 2021 or a little bit later. The actual start of construction will be dependent upon the actual approval of this CLOMAR, which is just really not known at this point, but once we have an idea of the approvability of that Clomar, we can then just make the decision to begin the construction on the project. Likely that will not probably happen until the end of 2021 sometime. That's the anticipation. Once the project is started, the actual duration for the construction is anticipated to be about 12 months. Maybe a little longer now that the Miller Road Bridge is a part of that contract, but probably not much. I think it should be able to be incorporated in and just wrapped into the overall construction. So with that, we conclude our presentation for this Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project. We really appreciate your attendance and your interest in this project. Thank you for taking the time to view this video and presentation. Again, just as a reminder, please address all your comments to Jesus Murillo. Contact information repeated here again. In your correspondence with the City of Scottsdale and Jesus, if you could be so kind as to please include the information shown in this bullet here, these particular elements, put those in your body of your text somewhere. It will help us to track these with regard to the actual camp planning and case numbering with the City of Scottsdale. Also encourage you to go back to the website where you are viewing this presentation from and load up the other presentations and view them as well, and download or take a look at the materials that are posted up there. I hope that this was helpful, and again, we thank you for your participation, and we do really look forward to hearing from you. There is a link on the webpage that is a survey, a comment, basically a comment response form that you can fill out digitally on the website if you would prefer, and include all your comments on there, and we will make sure those get directed to the correct people. Thank you, and have a wonderful year. Hello and welcome to the Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project virtual public meeting. This presentation is going to cover the project design details. My name is Scott Ogden, and I am with J.E. Fuller, and my role on this project is a consultant team project manager. For our presentation today, we're going to cover the brief history on the project design. We'll talk about the key design elements. We'll go over the existing and new flood walls. We'll talk a little bit about the erosion control and scour protection. We'll cover interior drainage elements, and we'll also talk about the Pinnacle Peak Road access, the Los Bertones Drive crossing, a future Miller Road crossing, and then finally we'll wrap it up with the FEMA submittals. So a brief discussion on the project design history. The project began as a recommended alternative from the Pinnacle Peak Area Drainage Master Study, which was finalized in 2016. Then the project moved to a design concept feasibility phase through the period of 2017-2018, wherein we took a look at the existing flood walls and did some non-destructive analysis of those flood walls. We also took a look at the existing erosion control that was in place to give an assessment as to whether or not they were feasible for moving the project forward. The next step was to move into a preliminary design phase, which began in early 2018 and lasted through 2019. Basically, that included a refinement of all the new flood wall limits and types. There was an analysis of the Los Bertones Drive and Happy Valley Road crossings to determine what kinds of alternatives might look the best there. And then we also looked into various types of new erosion protection. Within that time frame too, in the preliminary design elements, we also had a value engineering study wherein we took the elements that were conceptualized at that point and did a value engineering analysis of those things. At the next point, we stepped into the final design. And we started with a 30% design submittal that was completed in September 2019. We followed it up with a 60% design that was completed in March 2020, and we are now at the point of getting ready to submit our 90% designs. Looking at the overall project, there are several what we call key design elements. Referencing this exhibit here on the right-hand side of the slide, I want to just give you kind of an overview of the project in general. So this dashed line here is the project design reach. This is basically the reach of area that is going to be part of this design and construction project that we are discussing today. There are several elements that are shown on this map that compose parts of the key design elements. We have existing walls that are shown in these orangish colored lines. There are going to be new flood walls that are shown in the yellowish colored lines along here. And then finally, there's this other green colored polygons are the areas of disturbance that we anticipate within the wash boundary. So these are the areas that we anticipate having to get in and touch, remove vegetation from, do salvage along those lines, and then revegetate and replant after the project is finished. This star up here represents the apex of Rawhide Wash, and Rawhide Wash is currently considered or is delineated as an active alluvial fan, and by that it means that when the flows come down from Rawhide Wash and they hit this general vicinity, what happens is during major events, something that's bigger than like a 10-year storm or along those lines, you begin to see the flows break out and start going this direction down through here, and they do that in kind of a fan type of a wedge. Well, that particular fan aspect creates what we call a flow path uncertainty, and that flow path uncertainty means that when you have an active fan, the sediment that's moving can deposit and change the course of the flows through either erosion or depositional processes, and potentially change the amount of flows that goes southerly through the main water course, or maybe pushes more flow in a big event, and now all of a sudden there's a lot more flow going this direction. So one of the flood risk reduction measures was to provide to remove that flow path uncertainty that is created by this natural apex. And really the apex is not really functioning like it naturally would, simply because of all the development that's in the area, in the downstream area. So there's definitely a recontainment and trying to force the water through in different locations. And so part of the project design was to look at this and say, let's look at the idea of removing that uncertainty, and we'll build a system, and we'll make sure the system has capacity to move the flows all the way down here to the Pinnacle Peak Road Bridge and the Scottsdale Road Bridge, and then continue on downstream into the city of Phoenix. This system from Pinnacle Peak Road to Scottsdale Road has been designed for that full 100-year flow up here because of the requirements that FEMA imposes upon those type of designs. You have to design things as if all the flow could come down here, or if you were looking at something over here, you'd have to design that as if all the flow could come over here. So that uncertainty is something that really is something that is nice to be able to address with this project. The first phase, or the first part of the project, is to use these new flood walls. So there's new flood walls up in here, and it's to use these new flood walls north of Happy Valley Road to provide and convey and move those apex flows into a system that is basically provides conveyance. So the natural wash is left to function as it does. And all we're doing is pinning the outside edges of the wash so that the big flows, the really big flows, stay in this corridor and are contained through an engineering design to stay within this corridor and then keep within this corridor all the way down. The system itself will be considered by FEMA as a levee system. In other words, the flows will be building up onto the sides of these flood walls to some extent, both the new ones and some of the existing ones, and that provides for some standards of design that we must meet in order to meet the FEMA requirements and get credit for the system when we go to do some remapping at a later time. Another key element that is part of this project is to maintain the accessibility for both people and wildlife. We have several locations, this up in here is pretty wide open, and we've created several locations where we use these wall offsets to provide that access so that wildlife and people can get to and from the corridor, but we can still maintain the certifiability of the system and its integrity to move the 100-year flows downstream. Obviously, aesthetics is going to be very important. We want to make sure that any improvements to existing flood walls match and don't create something that's an eyesore for sure. We look at the new flood walls as we'll try and match to the nearest flood walls around them, or use some other type of a material that blends in with the natural desert environment that's out here. There's another slide presentation that covers those aesthetics in much more detail that you are recommended to go and review. We'll also be addressing all of the interior drainage, which we'll talk a little bit more here later in the presentation. There's a major improvements that are going to be constructed down here at Los Pratones Drive, where it currently is an at-grade cressing, and we need to provide some improvements down here to keep the flows from breaking out and running down through these areas. And then finally, the key aspect is to take these proposed improvements and submit them to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to get what we call a conditional letter of map revision, and that is, we'll discuss more of this at the end of the slide. One of the first aspects that we looked at were the existing flood walls that were constructed with the private developments through the watercourse corridor of Rawhide Wash, essentially between Happy Valley Road and Pinnacle Peak Road. We looked at several components to meet all of the FEMA requirements for what eventually will be a certified levee system. We had to evaluate the freeboard containment, and when we talk about freeboard, it is basically a safety factor that is required with any kind of a levee system, wherein you can see in this exhibit we have the design water surface elevation here in blue, and let's assume that at a 100-year flood, that's where the water would attain the water surface elevation. To meet the FEMA requirements, we have to add a freeboard to that, and then any structures that are in the containment have to contain to that freeboard elevation. The minimum in any location is 3 feet. Typically it's 3.5 feet, and then in around structures where we constrict the flows, it could be as much as 4 feet. So there's a significant amount of freeboard that occurs, and much of the improvements to the existing walls are solely required to meet this freeboard requirement. There is also an assessment of the erosion and scour protection. You can see a couple locations here where we've got, we'll talk a little bit more about these later, but you can see the wire baskets where the footing has been excavated. and whatnot. There was a look at the structural competency of the existing walls. At the first go around, we looked at trying to do this without destructive measures, using various tools that are available to us. We exposed the walls and then used ground penetrating radar tools to determine where the steel was and a few other things. And then evaluated those structurally to see if they could handle the flood flows that would be coming against them. Foundation stability was another key element that we had to look at, and you can see here where like this wall's foundation has been exposed, and we looked at the various soil geotechnical properties to look at the stability, and then finally a seepage element, so that looks at when the flows get up into this area, they tend to saturate, and can they even get high enough to then seep from this side of the wall to the dry side, wet side to dry side. So, and in some of the structural competency elements we were looking at, we actually decided that it would probably be beneficial to go and do some destructive testing, and that's what this series of slides represents here. This was one of the existing walls, and we did this at 4 various locations to basically take this wall down so we could see exactly what kind of reinforcing steel was in place, where, how often, how big, and then note that, and then that helped us to basically determine that there was enough reinforcement and structural integrity to limit the need for any augmentation structurally to these walls. You can see the steps at that one location, and that final slide is as a photo post testing, and you can barely even tell where it was. One of the design aspects for the project is going to be taking a look at several of these existing walls where we know that the flood wall height to meet the FEMA freeboard requirements is not sufficient. In those cases, we'll be looking at adding courses of block, basically, since most of these walls are masonry walls, in the form of about anywhere from 0 inches to 24 inches in raises. And the iron fence panels that are on the top will be removed and then refabricated and then replaced, with the intent of not changing this top profile at all, keeping and maintaining that top profile, but just adding in the necessary block to achieve the freeboard. In most cases, just get the freeboard in place. In order to help residents visualize the amount of raise that's going to be envisioned for the project, we have developed a series of maps that are posted up to the same site as this presentation. The file name for that should be Existing Floodwall Raise Maps PDF, and it's basically a PDF format document. And as you can see in this is an illustration of one of the pages. There are several elements going on here. There's a legend, and the amount of raise that is anticipated is color-coded in 8-inch increments, and you can see there are various color coding all through here. Again, most of the residential units are anywhere from 0 to 24 inches maximum in raise. These other elements here where it gets much higher are in locations that are generally not adjacent to homes. Each map, there's a whole series of these maps, and they basically just, each window cut walks up the watershed and then turns and comes back down the watershed. There's 38 individual maps in that particular PDF file. On each map, there is a north arrow and a scale, so these are scalable if you want to measure. And also, each address for the parcels that are within the design area have been added to these documents, and you can see the illustration here. So this particular address is labeled as such. These are searchable within the Adobe Acrobat file, and you can use them. You can use Acrobat's find feature to help find your address if you're adjacent to the wash. Basically what you would do is you'd open your document in Adobe Acrobat Reader, which is a free application that is available to anybody. And then once you have that document open, you'll simultaneously push the Control and the F keys, and what will happen is you'll get a little dialog box that'll open up within the Adobe Acrobat. And then within that dialog box, you can type in your address using something similar to this format, and then hit the Enter key, and it will search the document and find it if it's in there. If it's not in there, then, or not in the particular format you entered, you may have to adjust that a little bit. But there is a way to search if you want to, or you can just walk through the document and find your particular house if you happen to live next to the wash. Each of the color-coded running from gray to this color shows the rays, and then all black colored walls like what is illustrated here, those will be new walls. And so those are not walls that exist at this time, but that will be new walls constructed with the project. Regarding the scour protection at the existing flood walls, several of the existing flood walls have scour protection in place in the form of what we call Reno mattresses, which are basically, if you can imagine a wire mesh basket that's filled full of rock, and you can kind of see there's a picture right over here of what the wire mesh might look like. And it would be filled with rock that looks like this. When it's in place, it looks something like this. This is one of the walls that's across the Miller Road corridor right now, and in this particular location, you can see where some of that Reno mattress is actually exposed. All of the erosion protection that's out here that's existing is buried at this time, and that will continue to be the design metric as we move forward. Several of the areas we're looking at will probably require some augmentation of those existing mattresses in the way of adding some mattress out on the ends to give further protection for a deeper scour. And that will be done as a part of this project. There is also areas where we have existing flood walls where there is no erosion protection provided, and we'll be constructing new gabion mattresses for that. And the difference between a Reno mattress and a gabion mattress is basically the depth of the mattress itself. A Reno mattress is typically 9 inches and a gabion mattress is 12 inches. During the course of the structural assessments of the existing flood walls, it was determined that there was one flood wall that did not have the structural integrity necessary to be able to withstand the flood flows against the wall. This is what we refer to as Wall E, which basically extends north of the Miller Road crossing along the eastern edge of the watercourse. This particular wall is going to require some pilaster augmentation along the wall itself to just add some strengthening measures so that the wall basically doesn't get pushed over when the flood flows come against it. There are also a few locations where we need to extend the footer a little bit to add some additional foundation stability to a couple of walls. The limits of those are pretty limited. There's not very many areas where we need some of that. When it comes to new flood walls, of course, there's going to be brand new construction from the footer all the way up to the top of the wall. We anticipate using masonry block construction for all the reaches of new flood wall. In some cases, we might use a slump block type configuration, but in all cases, it will be some sort of a masonry construction. Of course, the aesthetics are going to be geared to match the either nearest existing walls that are within the area, or possibly, we'll use something that will be along the lines of a slump block. This is a particular is an example of what that wall might look like in an area of the project in the northern reach. Typical wall heights for the new flood walls range anywhere from 4 feet above the ground, existing ground, to as much as 8 feet above the existing ground. As previously stated, nearly all of the erosion protection and erosion and scour protection that's provided or that will be provided for the project is going to be either an augmentation of existing Reno mattresses or the construction of new Gabion mattresses with maybe some anchor baskets at a few locations. You can see the photos in this area. The photos here and here are some locations where existing Reno mattresses were augmented a little bit, and we'll be redoing many more of them. There's the Gabion mattresses. The intent is to build them down to the full scour depth and then bury them back and allow for the replanting of vegetation and basically reestablishing of the natural wash corridor, so that they're there as insurance, they're there as protection, but they're generally not going to be seen unless there's a significant flow event that exposes the erosion mattresses. The graphic up here on the right is an illustration of what the construction process might look like. You can see the baskets are all laid out, tied together, and then they backfill with rock of varying sizes, and then they'll put a lid and wire tie all that back up, and then eventually it'll get buried back so that the natural grade of the wash is restored. When we talk about interior drainage, we're referring to any of the local drainage that would occur or would be developed during a storm event that is on the dry side, what we call the dry side of the levee system. So you can see in this graphic here, these colors, this color ramp is the flow corridor for a rawhide wash. And these areas on the outside perimeter are areas that would either drain back to rawhide wash, or many of the areas drain away and discharge in other directions. Wherever the areas will drain back towards rawhide wash, we're going to provide a mechanism or some means for the water to re-enter rawhide wash, and in the same design, not allow for the flows when this is flowing full to reverse and get back up and flood the areas and kind of defeat the purpose of the levee system. This graphic on the right shows some of the drainage areas that are part of the interior design, and these green arrows are arrows where those flows are returned back to rawhide wash. You can see a couple graphics. This is at Los Bertones Drive on the western edge of the wash. There's a channel that comes into a storm drain that then goes across and discharges into the downstream side of the wash. Over here in the Los Bertones Townhome subdivision, there's a drainage channel network that you can kind of see delineated along here, that runs down from lot to lot to lot to lot to lot, all the way down through the backside of all those lots, and ultimately discharges back to rawhide wash at Los Bertones Drive through this little structure here. So we have to capture those flows and return them back to rawhide wash without allowing the flood flows to back up through this. We have another fairly significant area of collection where flows. You can see these threads are coming down, and there's flows that enter into Rawhide Wash here naturally. When we build the system, we're going to cut those off, but we're going to provide a storm drain that will basically capture those flows, and then we'll use what we call backflow prevention devices that basically let the flow only go one direction. So they will only go this way. If the flows get high over here, they will not reverse and come back. So moving down to the southern end of the project, down near Pinnacle Peak Road, there's an existing sidewalk that comes off of the Pinnacle Peak Road sidewalk that enters into the wash just upstream of the Pinnacle Peak Road bridge. And you can see this is the aerial view of that. This is the commercial area that is adjacent to the wash down here. Scottsdale Road is just over here. And this is a ground level picture where you can see this is shooting this direction looking down. You can see where the sidewalk here enters into the wash. This is a pretty major access point for a lot of folks to enter into the wash. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining that, but yet we still have to provide this levee system that keeps the water from actually coming out of this and going the other direction. So part of this will be a design system of dual walls where we have the main flood wall, new flood wall coming down here. Then we have a secondary flood wall that's going to come up here, and the path is going to be regraded up and around and back down to the wash in this area. There'll also be some storm drain that'll be constructed to pick up the local drainage and then discharge it into the box or into the bridge section. You can see kind of what the two walls will look like adjacent to each other. The path is here, that cross section is cut through here, path going up, path coming down. So you'll walk up this and then you turn around and you come back down this other side. This path and width in here is about 18 feet, so it's nice and wide to allow for plenty of access. One of the major design areas is Los Pratones Drive. Los Pratones Drive is a private road crossing that basically crosses the wash at grade, so it's right at the elevation of the flow line of the wash. Whenever Rawhide Wash runs, the road becomes impassable, and folks that would normally use this have to find other routes to get out of their subdivisions. This particular photo right here is a photo that was taken during a recent flood event. You can see that there is a significant amount of water that's crossing this road, but that particular event probably doesn't even add up to a full 5-year event that in the amount of volume that's moving across that road. So it doesn't take a lot of flow to completely inundate this road and just make it impassable. As a part of our project, because we're doing containment and we have these flows that are coming through here, we have existing walls that are coming to and away from the road, and we have to do something along the road to keep the flows from breaking out and then traveling down through these subdivisions and causing flooding and presenting a flood risk to those particular areas. And so as a part of this project, we're going to use floodgates that are basically automatic floodgates that automatically deploy once the water starts getting to them. They're actuated by hydraulic forces. They don't need anybody there to lift them or lower them. They automatically lift and lower based on wherever the water level is. And with their functioning, they will essentially shut off any flow from leaving the road and going down through these areas. And provide the flood protection for those areas. In addition, the project is probably going to do some minor regrading and reconstructing of the road itself. In particular, at this eastern gate crossing down in this area, we need to get a little more elevation on the road where the gate is located to make the gate work the most optimally. And there's also going to be some fairly significant scour protection that's going to be constructed on the downstream side of the road to mitigate the scour that's already started. And you can drive by there and see lots of rock that's placed down through here and stuff. And so that scour needs to be mitigated. Again, all that infrastructure is going to be buried with regard to the scour protection, but it will be there to keep the road in place should the wash run to the full design amount. So let's talk a little bit more about the floodgates themselves. The floodgates, as previously mentioned, are automatic, and they are actuated through buoyant forces by the floodwater reaching them, and then they mechanically or rotate into place and then lock up. The gates themselves are, when they're not deployed, are just part of the road surface. So you can imagine this is a cross section here through what would be a typical gate installation. And that gate installation is, this is the road. There's no, this would be your road surface, and the gate would be sitting there in the road surface, and you really wouldn't even know that the road is, that the gate is in place, other than you just drive over it and it looks different than the asphalt. When the flood waters begin to come and build up, you can see that there's a grate right here. If you look over here, there's a grate right here in the photo, and the water gets into the tray through the grate, begins to build up. The buoyant forces begin to lift the gate, and as the water gets higher, the gate gets lifted higher until such point as it hits a rotational point, and then it locks into place and then stays there until the water recedes. This graphic up here is a illustration of a project that was somewhere back in the Midwest. It was a hospital complex, very large hospital complex. And there's probably 12 to 15 floodgates constructed around the course of this project. This particular photo is a photo of a 500-year event that occurred at that location, flooding the complete area around this building. And you can see floodgates here, here, and here, and that they are deployed, sitting in place, and they are, there's an obvious differentiation between the flood elevations on this side and the dryness on the other side. So they worked in every case at every location, and they have a complete 100% success rate of deploying every time. The buoyant forces are significant, and they definitely will raise those gates. When the floods recede, then obviously these gates would all set back down in, and then the access to and from this complex through these various roads and whatever would be restored. We have a little photo or a little video here that I want to click on that hopefully will give some illustration as to the functioning of the gates. So you can see water's building up. They're feeding water into the system as if like in a flood situation. There's a wiper wall, the gate, the grate, and the other wiper walls here. That gate rotates and interfaces with that wiper wall to create a watered seal. That's a good picture of the gate or the grate. I'm sorry, as the water begins to flow into there, gets into the tray. The higher the water gets, the higher the gate is lifted. Buoyant forces picking the gate up and keeping that seal against those wiper walls, keeps the water on this side. You can see it's clearly dry on this side. And the water, as the flood flows continue, the water gets deeper. The deeper the water gets, the more the rotation of the gate moves up. And then it continues to rotate. As the water gets deeper, it continues to rotate until bang. There the gate locks into place, and and they will remain there until such time as the flood passes. So something I mentioned at the beginning of the slide presentation is a future Miller Road project. At this point in our project, after our 60% were done, the city of Scottsdale was able to come up with some money to be able to build this Miller Road crossing. And so the Miller Road crossing is going to be constructed nearly simultaneously with the Rawhide project by the city of Scottsdale. It will lag the Rawhide project by maybe as much as 6 months, probably no more than a year. At least that's the intent at this point. And you can see here in this view, we're looking actually southerly towards along the Miller Road alignment. Pinnacle Peak Road's in the distance, and then the extent of the East Parkview, or the Miller Road at the intersection here of East Parkview Lane. And what's going to happen is they're going to improve this road all the way down to Pinnacle Peak Road. As a part of those improvements, you can see our Rawhide Wash corridor is through here, and as a part of the improvements, there's going to be the construction of a bridge to go up and over Rawhide Wash and come back down again. That bridge is illustrated in this graphic over here. The design has really just begun for this, so there's not, we don't have a lot of details on this at the moment, but it will ultimately be worked into the overall system as part of the Rawhide system and design. The Miller Road project is in place to complete a gap in Miller Road between Pinnacle Peak and Happy Valley Road. The design began in October 2020, and these improvements have been planned for since the 1990s. This has been the plan for this Miller Road crossing has been in place for quite a few years. It's going to be a 4-lane roadway with bicycle lanes and a sidewalk. The Miller Road project plans to start their public outreach sometime around March 2021. The design is expected to be completed sometime around March 2022, with construction beginning maybe as early as the summer of 2022. So this is going to be a project that's going to wind up being parallel with the Rawhide Wash project, but is a separate project that is being performed by the city of Scottsdale. If you have questions or have further comments on this, or would like a little more information, I would suggest waiting either till the public outreach begins in March, or this Scottsdale project manager is Jeremy Richter, and his contact information is here. As a final aspect of the project design, there will be a FEMA submittal, well, actually several FEMA submittals, but at the end, at this design phase, we will be making a FEMA submittal with what eventually will be these 90% drawings once we get them in place. And FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the submittal is basically to do a revision of the existing floodplains and remap them to reflect the new Rawhide Wash improvements. So you can see in this illustration here, this red limit is the existing floodplain limits as they are to, well, when this exhibit was created. I think this one's actually changed a little bit now, but this was the existing limit of the floodplain as it is on the FEMA the flood insurance rate maps now. The red areas are areas that are going to be removed from the floodplain with this FEMA submittal and the construction of this project. And you can see that the lion's share of the removals are all up here in the city of Scottsdale with many homes. The total structure count is somewhere around 850 structures that are anticipated to be removed by this project. So that is flood risk protection for over 850 structures. The redelineation will be done in 4 reaches. We'll have our design reach, which is from the fan apex down to the Scottsdale Road bridge. Then from there to the Salt River, or the Loop 101 freeway, State Route Loop 101 freeway, there is going to be another delineation reach, a third delineation reach from the freeway down to the CAP dike impoundment, and then the CAP dike itself. We'll pursue a conditional letter of map revision, which is basically making a submittal to FEMA with the design documents and all of the calculations and substantiating materials. And FEMA will make a determination that if yes, indeed, if this project is constructed as proposed, then it should be eligible to remap the floodplain as proposed. Once we have that conditional letter of map revision in hand, and once the construction is finally completed, the project can then submit for a final letter of map revision, which will finalize the actual changing of the maps and removal of the or redelineating of the floodplains. So that concludes our presentation of the detailed design for the Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project. In closing, if there are comments or questions, there is a comment response form that is on the website where these recordings are included. Please address all comments and questions to Jesus Murillo, the senior planner with the City of Scottsdale. His contact information is shown here to the left. Also, if you're contacting the City of Scottsdale about the project, be sure and add use the following in all of your correspondence as far as the planning number that is associated with this project. There's also links provided for presentation and access to supplemental materials. Thank you for your participation, and we really look forward to hearing from you.
This presentation will cover the landscape design and wall aesthetics for the Rawhide Wash Flood Hazard Mitigation Project. In this presentation, we'll be looking at the aesthetics for the existing walls. We'll look at new wall construction, also the access to Rawhide Wash by both the residents and wildlife access, and we'll also look at landscape salvage and the landscape restoration. Primarily, the wall will be raised by adding additional block to the top of an existing wall. This could be actually a solid wall, or as the one to the right you can see where it actually has a view fence, and we'll show how that is actually configured in the following slides. We're going to take each wall location as we go from south to north. The first one being Wall A, which is in the very area down by Pinnacle Peak, the business park. And this one will be actually adding a concrete block to the wall. The wall finish and color will remain exactly like the existing wall. As you can see, sort of the befores and afters. By the lower left, you can see where we've actually sketched in the height of the new wall over the existing wall. And then the one to the right is actually sort of the after photograph with the additional block and stucco. Wall locations B and F will increase the height of the solid wall portion of the wall. To do this, we'll be removing the view fence, we'll be adding block as necessary, we'll refinish the block wall and then reinstall the view fence. At the bottom 2 photographs, you can see on the lower left where the block will actually be added along with the new view fence, and then to the right you can see the finish. We will be matching the exact same finish and color and the wall type. Wall location C will also be increasing the wall along the view fence. This will require a little different method from the standpoint we'll be salvaging the existing view fence. The view fence is quite a custom item, and so we want to actually salvage and actually reuse that. Once the block is raised, it will have the same stucco finish and color, and then we'll reinstall and repaint the view fence. Wall location D also increases the wall height. This is along Los Bertones neighborhood. This was a very straightforward wall height increase. We'll be matching the exact finish and color of the wall. Wall location E along Santa Catalina Estates will remain in place, and any wall modifications necessary will match the existing color and the finish of the wall. New walls will be installed as part of the project. The majority of the new walls will be up around Happy Valley Road and one by Santa Catalina Estates. The final wall color and finish will be coordinated with the neighborhood. And a couple of the options that we're looking at currently are the stucco finish, which obviously everybody's familiar with and very typical in this area. But then one other type of wall that we're looking at is called a slump block wall with a mortar wash finish. This is all integral color and pretty much maintenance free. In either case, either stucco or the mortar wash, we're looking to make sure that the color palette that's being proposed actually blends in as very much an earth tone in and around the native desert area. We will be accommodating access into the wash through breaks in the wall itself. The way we accomplish that is we have overlapping walls, and there's a slight grade rise or grade change in between the walls. You can see it's slightly raised. So what this enables us to do is be able to open the wall, but at the same time be able to control any waters coming down Rawhide Wash still contained within the flood walls or the elevation change. These locations are primarily at either where wash or natural washes are entering Rawhide Wash, or where we have larger areas of open space. In order to construct the project, we will be removing plant material and native plant material from the area. We've identified an area of approximately 30 to 40 feet width that parallels the flood walls. This area will be identifying the salvage trees and cacti. We'll go through a process to actually remove those materials, and all this will be in accordance with the City of Scottsdale's native plant inventory and salvage requirements. That material then will be placed, the plant material will be placed in a temporary nursery until we're ready to actually re-landscape. The type of plant material that we will be looking to salvage are the trees, which include mesquite, palo verde, and ironwoods. And then obviously cacti of many varieties, including the saguaros. The landscape restoration for the area will really mimic what's there now. It's referred to as a xeric riparian landscape, which is really a dry wash environment. As part of the landscape restoration techniques, we'll be introducing a method called water harvesting. This is a way of being able to sculpt the land in such a way that we can direct natural rainwater to plant material, especially trees. This will help them get established and ensure long-term survivability. Landscape restoration will follow the installation of the Reno mattress or the erosion control. That's the hatched item that goes horizontal that shows the depths. Also, after the flood wall is in place. Once these two items are constructed, fill will be placed back over the Reno mattress, and then the landscaping can then be established. The first thing we'll be looking at is location for the salvage trees. Since these are the larger trees, the larger boxes, we'll be placing those in areas we have the greatest depth over the Reno mattress itself. In addition to tree salvage, we will also be planting nursery-grown trees. This is a little bit more unique than the typical trees or plants you buy at your nursery. These are actually called tall pot trees. This is a growing technique that the Flood Control District has perfected over the last 20 years. This is a method of where the tree is actually grown so it actually develops a taproot. In the upper right, you can see sort of the planting detail and also the tubes they're grown in. And what this occurs is the plant is actually encouraged to grow a taproot. And the way that it's actually planted is a hole is actually bored into the ground. Water is then introduced into the hole, so it actually saturates the very lower level. And then the tree is planted, and the sleeve, the pipe that you see, or the planting sleeve, is then basically removed. Currently, Flood Control District is getting 70 to 80% survival rate, and these trees are basically planted without irrigation. The tall pot trees will be placed again over the Reno mattress, and we have a little more flexibility on where these trees can go depending on the depth that we have. Following the tree placement, we'll actually apply hydroseeding. Hydroseeding is a method of applying native seed within a binder. And this is actually sprayed on, as you can see by the photograph. And this does a couple things. Not only does it actually distribute the native seed, but also has a binder in it. And the binder basically enables the seed to stay in one place where it actually controls erosion. So through natural germination over a year's period, the seed stays in place. This method does not require irrigation, but really relies on our natural rainfall for germination. Plants that will be in the hydro seeding, again, all come from this area or the same natural environment as the seed type. It will include ironwood, mesquite. It will also have palo verde, but we also have a series of shrubs and ground covers that are very common, including creosote and burr sage. The following series of slides puts the whole project together. So what's illustrated on the right is the new or revised or modified wall, flood wall. It shows a 10-foot clear zone along the wall. This is required by the city of Scottsdale so they can actually maintain and also inspect the wall. Below ground, you can see the erosion control protection, and then it will actually be plated or soil placed back on top of that area. It will be graded to somewhat a natural contour or basically landform, and from there, the landscape process begins. The landscape will actually include the salvage trees, as we mentioned before, on an area where we have the depth of earth between the top and basically the top of the erosion protection and the finished growth. Then come the tall pots, again, where we have the depth. The final operation and restoration is the application of hydro seed. One thing to note is the salvage trees will be on drip irrigation for approximately 3 years for their establishment. This concludes this presentation. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Jeremiah Hancock, Project Manager with Rummel Construction. Rummel Construction was selected to be the contractor on the Rawhide Wash Project, and in this portion of the presentation we're going to be talking about Rummel as a company and some of our history and background. We're going to be talking about the benefits of a construction manager at risk or a CMAR delivery method of a project. We're also going to be talking about some high-level construction approaches on how we plan to accomplish this job with minimal impact to the environment and to the surrounding neighbors, as well as talk briefly about some of our proposed interaction with the neighbors that are surrounding the wash that will be directly impacted by the construction activities. Rummel Construction has been servicing Arizona and the Southwest since 1996. Rummel is a heavy civil general contractor specializing in grading and drainage projects. Since we are a local Scottsdale company with our headquarters located less than a mile from Rawhide Wash, we are excited for the opportunity to perform as a community member on this project. Rummel employs over 600 local team members and owns and operates one of the largest equipment fleets in the state. We are dedicated to excellence, quality, and being good stewards to the environment and surrounding residents. For the Rawhide Wash Project, Rummel was selected to perform under a CMAR procurement process, meaning the contractor is selected based on qualifications. This environment promotes collaborative teaming with the contractor, owner, and designer, benefiting the overall construction schedule and cost. The overall benefit allows partnering with stakeholders to improve project delivery, public involvement, and protection of natural assets. Throughout the duration of the project, our main priority is to respect the surrounding residents and provide a sense of understanding and comfort during construction. Some of the scopes of work that will be involved on this project include the raising of existing flood walls, erosion protection, which could include installing or improving existing bank protection, or adding new bank protection to areas that don't currently have it, as well as revegetating the site back to its original condition with native landscaping. During the project, Rummel will employ a segmented approach, which will help limit the duration of disturbance to each individual section of the project. Throughout the project, it is Rummel's priority to create a safe environment to residents, workers, and the general public. In addition, we will ensure that all property is secure and protected. Staging areas for equipment and materials will be located in areas with limited impact to surrounding residents. All work will take place within the limits of disturbance and will minimize the impacts to the natural state of the wash. Rummel understands the importance of keeping dust and construction site disturbance to a minimum. We will ensure to comply with all dust control requirements and are committed to acknowledging and alleviating any community concerns involving dust control. One of the key factors of the Rawhide Wash Project is community involvement. Rummel is committed to maintaining continuous communication with all stakeholders. An example of this is pre- and post-construction surveys. This means we will survey before and after construction, ensuring all property is maintained or restored to its original state. In addition, Rummel will employ a community outreach coordinator, providing a single point of contact for residents. This creates a liaison between residents and Rummel, ensuring any and all concerns are addressed. We will provide a website-based construction notification center, which includes updates such as schedule, upcoming work, major milestones, and any key points of contact for the project. This concludes this portion of the presentation. We thank you for listening, and we look forward to working with you in the future.